It's great to be back at the Institute of Physics today for another Science Council policy conference, following on from the success of our Net Zero conference here last year. Over the past 3 years, the Science Council has been developing a programme of policy work to bring together its diverse membership of more than 30 professional bodies and learned societies that span the full range of scientific disciplines. Our policy work brings our community together, fostering collaboration and allowing us to speak with one voice to policymakers on issues of pan-scientific interest. The UK's research and innovation workforce is highly talented and is a tremendous national asset. Yet we know that we face a number of challenges in realising the government's ambitions over the coming years. The UK's R&I workforce will require more researchers, innovators, technicians and professionals who will need to keep pace with rapidly evolving sectors and ever-changing skilled needs. Today is an opportunity for the science, research and innovation community to come together and to consider how effective our current policies are in working to meet the UK's skills challenges, to consider what more can be done, and to reflect on the role our community can play in strengthening policy in this area. The conference today has been generously supported by UKRI and has been developed with the input of many Science Council member organisations and other partners to whom we owe a great deal of gratitude. We also are enormously grateful to the Institute of Physics for once again hosting us here today. So I'll now hand over to Tom Grinier, their Chief Executive, to welcome us to the building.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Institute of Physics. And it is a pleasure to be hosting again the Science Council's annual conference, and particularly on such an important subject. At the Institute of Physics, like so many of you in the room, we do value our membership of the Science Council, and we value the peer-led discussions with organisations like today to come and exchange knowledge at events like this. Just a great opportunity to progress interdisciplinary solutions vital to tackling key topics. And for all of us, one of the most important areas is that skills challenge. For those of you who don't know the IOP, we're a professional body and the learned society for physics in the UK and Ireland, with an active role in promoting cooperation and physics around the world. And we strive to make physics accessible to people from all backgrounds. Our 21,000 members demonstrate their professional expertise in physics in settings ranging from schools, universities, national research facilities, businesses of all sizes, and roles as varied as teachers, researchers, apprentices, technicians, engineers, and product developers. I could go on, I imagine later today we will go on and talk about all the skills that are required for those various roles and the variety of those roles. But the skills, whether it's in physics or the science skills represented across this room, either directly or those we represent, I think I can safely say that all of us see the need to address the skills shortages in our sectors as a matter of priority and urgency. This is why we are here today, to dedicate our attention and focus to look at the problem and thinking together about a solution. The need to work together so we can address this challenge is something I end up stressing at every opportunity. Sometimes it can be at the end of agendas. It's surprising how often it works its way up to the top of agendas. Because I think we need to be clear. If we want the country, the society and innovation to be the country and society and innovation that we want it to be, it's powered by people, by their knowledge, skills and experiences. For the UK to become a more innovative economy and realise the full benefits in terms of improved growth, prosperity and living standards, it requires a strong, diverse and adaptable workforce, and skill issues are prominent at every single level. This is the point we made when, along with the chief executives of the Royal Society of Biology and the Royal Society of Chemistry, we made to Science Minister George Freeman. Again, we didn't have skills, we had skills on our agenda. We didn't have it as the first thing on our agenda, but it ended up being the first thing that we discussed in that meeting. So a couple of weeks later, I was quite pleased when at the Conservative Party conference, the Science Minister said that skills shortages are what keeps him awake at night. Although I'm not claiming credit for keeping the Science Minister up at night and giving him sleepless nights, I'm sure it may have played a little role. I'd like to focus briefly on one of the government's science and technology framework, 5 critical technologies as well for a second, which again we discussed with the Science Minister, that area of quantum. When we were in with the Treasury, again, skills, we were talking about the overall area of quantum, but skills were absolutely central to achieving what we want the UK to be, which is an economic powerhouse when it comes to quantum. But we can only do this if we have the skills to do that groundwork. So tackling the skill shortages that are stopping businesses from recruiting and removing obstacles that are preventing people from diverse backgrounds entering the workforce. It was also a message in front of the Science, Technology and Innovation Select Committee to give evidence. So we're out there, we're making the noises, we're putting the pieces together, but how can we collectively come together? How can we unite the various pieces? How can we speak as one voice as the science community? And last, but certainly not least, we had the pleasure of discussing some of the big challenges with Dame Angela when we met about a month ago, and again briefly this morning, who is here today. And I think being here today and giving the opening address is a real testimony to both the importance of today, the importance of skills, and the importance that certainly has come across from our conversations. And from graduate to postgraduate skills in priority technology areas to well understood issues of physics skills in schools and teacher shortages, we've got to come together to address that, to address the progress that is being made, but also highlight areas where we can come together with a strong commitment from all parts of the sector. So thank you to the Science Council for convening us and making space for these important conversations. And thank you to all of you for coming here and contributing with your experience. I look forward to what's undoubtedly going to be a great day of lively debate on such an important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. I think that was an excellent framing for the day. Now I have the great pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker for today, the UK Government's Chief Scientific Advisor, Professor Dame Angela McLean. Angela took over from Patrick Vallance in April of this year, having previously been Chief Scientific Advisor for the Ministry of Defence. Until April 2023, Angela was a Professor of Mathematical Biology in the Department of Zoology at Oxford University and a Fellow of the All Souls College. Angela's research included the use of mathematical models to aid our understanding of the evolution and spread of infectious agents. She was elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society in 2009, having previously been awarded the Garbour Medal and Weldon Memorial Prize, and received her damehood in 2018. We're delighted that Angela has taken the time to join us today. Angela, welcome.
So I'm going to do a funny keynote address because actually I'm going to try and speak for not very long in order to have some time for questions and some attempts at answers. And we've got to be finished by 10, so I'm going to crack on. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. Yes, the fact that I am here is part of me showing to you as a community that I take our problems, and they are problems, with skills in our workforce very seriously indeed. So before I get into just a little bit about what are we doing in government about it, let me just tell you a bit about my job. So I have this job where I'm Government Chief Scientific Advisor, and my role, therefore, is to advise the Prime Minister and Government on all matters related to science, technology and engineering. And that is to make sure that policies are informed by the best scientific evidence. And the way we put it is science advice for the challenges of our times that will stand the test of time. The next thing I was going to do was before and before, but that's already been done for us, so we can skip that bit and move on. Don't have to tell you about what it was like being Chief Scientific Advisor to the Ministry of Defence. A really important part of my role is to champion science and engineering inside government. I am this thing called HOSEP, so that's Head of the Science and Engineering Profession. So that's about 10,000 people who are civil, public and Crown servants. And with that set of people, we really have two priorities. So one of those is to embed science and engineering in government. Please don't think that there are 10,000 scientists sat in Whitehall getting on with it. That is not what it's like at all. There are astonishingly few scientists in Whitehall, and those 10,000 members of the science and engineering profession, I can tell you, at least half of them are probably in our government labs, which for one reason or another tend to be actually quite a long way from London. So first of all, we want much more of that kind of thinking inside Whitehall and right across all bits of government, so including, all of the public sector. And then secondly, we need to build a diverse and capable science and engineering workforce for ourselves, as well, of course, also for the country. So we are very pleased that you've got this conference here today to talk about the supply of STEM skills for the whole workforce. It's absolutely vital. Already mentioned was this thing, this thing called the Science and Technology Framework. For those of you who haven't been sort of living this for the last, how long is it now? A few years now, I think the story of our declaration as a country that we're going to be a science and technology superpower really goes back to something that was called the Integrated Review that was published in 2021. I can tell you that there was some debate about, were we really going to say superpower? That's a bit forward. But for me, the sort of defining moment that I said, okay, I will say it, was in my previous job. I was at a conference in Hawaii, poor me, and in a bit of the conference that was so secret that you didn't only have to leave your phone outside, you weren't even allowed to take in paper and pencil. And I had to give a talk at this thing. And I stood there and I literally sort of scrunched up my toes and said, yes, we're going to be a science and technology superpower. And at the end of it, a whole bunch of Americans, this was mostly military people, came up to me and said, it is such a relief to hear our partner, the UK, actually saying that, because by goodness, we do need you to be that. And remember, imagine what it's like to be a military person sat in Hawaii. You are the first line of defense if very bad stuff were to start to come over from across the Pacific. I mean, they are very exposed and worried there, and they really want us to crack on with this ambition of being a science and technology superpower, because they actually acknowledge that in some places they need our help, even though they're so huge. So IR 2021 was when we first said it. The IR, so good we named it twice. We had the IR 2023 refresh a couple of years later. But the thing that really comes out of all of that for us in science and technology in government is this thing called the Science and Technology Framework, which is a list of, we call it 10 strands now, which I find very boring. We always called it 10 big things when we were writing it. So 10 big things right across government that represent a systems intervention to switch from being a country that's actually brilliant at doing basic science and technology. We are so good at the ideas bit of it. And frankly, we're not that brilliant at taking those ideas and turning them into products and services and companies that will A, improve people's lives, and B, generate prosperity. And why am I telling you about the S&T framework? Because one of those things is all about skills. So one of the 10 big things is a skills agenda. And within that, two statements, for example, are that we have to attract talent from all around the world. Another one is build a skilled workforce for tomorrow's industries. Because, of course, around the world, many of the fastest growing industries are in companies that are built on really innovative science and technology. And the pace of development is fast, and we genuinely cannot afford to be left behind. So what can be done? First of all, let me talk a bit about what we're doing inside government. So every one of the 10 big things has what's called a senior responsible owner. So that's a department that is charged with making this thing happen. For skills, it's DFE. And really importantly, they are leading a cross-Whitehall plan. And for those of you who don't know Whitehall, that's a big deal. Doing something cross-Whitehall is very difficult. That includes the Home Office, it includes DSIT, the new Science, Innovation and Technology Department. It includes DBT, it includes Cabinet Office, aimed at this question of building STEM skills across the economy. It's actually one of my own personal priorities as I came into this job, is to build a more scientific civil service. We have quite a few ways to bring talent in, to bring science and engineering talent into the civil service. There's something called the Science and Engineering Fast Stream, so that brings people in either after a first degree or after a second degree into what is basically our sort of premier development process within civil service. So there's a bit of that explicitly goes out looking for scientists and engineers. There are 40 apprenticeship schemes for scientists and engineers across government. There's a new scheme called STEM Futures, which is about building basically porosity into what you might think of as the cell that is the civil service, to get people to come in for amounts of time that can be variable or go out. So we send out people who we've sort of bookmarked as future leaders to go and work in industry. So hope we'll get them back. And then, of course, we have my own CSA network. Every government department has a chief scientific advisor who is almost always an outsider, often an academic, but not always, brought in just for 5 years to be basically the voice of independent outside science, advising right up at ministerial level. One of the things I would really like to do is build something sort of in between the CEFs and the CSAs, which would grab scientists who've done about, say, 10 years work as a scientist and say, look, come and be a civil servant. We'll show you how to apply for a civil service job. And in theory, every civil service job is open to anybody. But I can tell you it's difficult to get into the civil service from the outside because, like every community, we appoint in our own image. And I mean, there's this it's quite a bewildering thing, the civil service appointments procedure. It's extremely fair and very, very structured. And frankly, if you wanted to get into it, you would need not quite a PhD in how to get you would need some coaching in how to write one of those applications. So I think that's the first priority in my view is more talent in. We just don't have enough scientists inside the civil service. But equally, we need to build awareness in our existing workforce. We're really interested, we personally Go Science, in building science literacy at all levels. And actually, we've just launched, well, it's not no longer just, but when I was new, we had just launched 2 sort of learning modules, one of which was all about how to ask for science advice, and the other was all about how to offer science advice. And I think it's worth making it clear to an audience who don't necessarily work in the civil service what kind of level of science advice are we talking about here, okay? So sometimes it's, super highfalutin rocket science stuff, what difference is quantum going to make to the way we run the civil service? But other times it's not. Let me give you an example that came from this summer. I'll be a bit vague about it because it's a bit depressing. I was asked to look over an experiment that a high-profile part of government was going to commission. I looked at the experiment and I said, hang on a minute, this experiment has no replicates. And they were like, replicates? What are replicates? And I said, replicates is when you do the same thing again and again and again, so you get some idea of how much natural variability there is in this system, so you can tell if the differences mean anything. Anyway, so they go back to the people they were going to buy it from, the people who buy it, who are selling it, say, that would be very, very expensive. You don't want any of those replicas. I mean, yes, of course we could design you the perfect experiment, but this is the experiment you can afford. So I said, don't buy it. But they went ahead and bought it anyway. Do you know what they came to me and said last week? Can you guess? We've done the experiment and it turns out we can't analyze it. Fortunately, what is the one thing that an advisor should never, ever say? I told you so. So I did bite my tongue. But I think that gives you a sense of, people say, well, how could you possibly advise across all of science? Well, sometimes I get a very specific question, I phone a friend. But quite often, I'm talking about things like the importance of replication and the importance of reproducibility. Basically, if you do an experiment and you don't describe it in a way that somebody else can also give it a go, you're not really doing science. And third thing on our list of what we think is really important is that as we build that skilled STEM workforce, it should be a diverse workforce too. We put diversity, inclusivity, and openness right at the heart of everything we do. We feel very strongly that if science is going to play a proper role in the civil service, it needs to be done by a diverse workforce. Right, I feel like I'm going to run out of time if I don't shut up. So I am not going to talk about what you can do because you're already doing it. Thank you very much for what you're doing, bringing together your different constituent parts, raising awareness for us in government, and also inspiring new generations to join, get trained up as STEM people. So do reach out to us, work with government. You can, those of us in the science and engineering profession, that thing that I'm the head of, will always be happy to engage with you. And that leaves us 5 minutes for your questions. Shoot. Yes.
Thank you, Dame Angela. I disagree with almost everything you've said, I think, and I should say I'm Robert Massey from the Royal Astronomical Society, and we're very good on fundamental science, but we're, in a submission to Parliament, we're writing about its applications as well. I was going to ask one question, and it's good that you mentioned diversity and inclusion, because I think, the messaging from the Secretary of State on that recently has not been helpful, and particularly the announcement of the conference, the Conservative conference, about attacking woke science. And I can tell you that, the members of our organisation I was in touch with reacted quite badly to that. I think the only positive thing you could say about it is that it didn't get much publicity, if I'm honest, because had it, I think that would have been even more damaging. So I hope, I'd be interested to know if and how that's worked up into government policy. But I would just pass the message back, and I know you may not be able to comment very well on this, but I would just pass the message back. That was not a helpful message, particularly in the context of the workforce. If we're trying to attract people in, to have that as a political priority seem really askew.
Very good. That's not a question, but I can say to you, message received.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Joseph from LifeArt. We focus on early stage translation, and I definitely agree with your point about needing the skills to turn basic research into things that we can actually use in real life. I suppose a question that I'd be really interested in your perspective on, and maybe one that we'll just get into throughout the day, is for a lot of the people here probably, we're kind of coming into the civil service and ministers from the outside, and we're trying to convince people of the skills gaps in our areas. So I'm really interested in what is considered to be a gold standard of a skills gap analysis or a workforce mapping, because otherwise we can spend a lot of time and energy and frankly money producing reports with PwC that don't necessarily kind of float.
So I can tell you one very good one, but it is a bit of a weird sector. So nuclear has a very good analysis, but of course they are building things that it will take 20, 30 years to build. So they do actually know what they're going to need over the next few decades. The analysis that I hate when I see it is the very specific analysis that says, in 20 years' time, we're going to need this precise skill. Well, how do you know? But actually, I think we do know the kinds of skills that people are going to need. And actually, I think most of us in science and technology are supportive of the idea that people should be studying both maths and English until they leave school. We can nitpick over, is it really maths or is it numeracy that we mean? But, I say, give the guy a break. We all want numeracy, and if we call it maths, it's fine. We were talking about this upstairs. It would seem to me that what would I go? I would say to you as a community, be careful not to produce a whole range of studies that end up saying we need a STEM work, which if you stack them up and get your calculator out, end up saying we need about 150% of every cohort to go into STEM. Because I mean, that is a mistake we often make as scientists, isn't it? Is that we sort of claim for our own bit of science a particular importance, when in fact we do all know that yes, you really need these core skills, and I would include the ability to string together a sentence that makes sense and ideally write it down on a bit of paper. I think as well as the sort of detailed stuff about the particular technical skills, it will be very useful if this community were able to come up with something reasonably holistic that says, back of an envelope, we probably need more than half of the kids to be coming into STEM skills. And as we were discussing upstairs, we can't wait for the kids to get trained and enter the workforce. We've got to do something about the existing workforce. And as we were discussing upstairs, I mean, this is a golden time for lifetime learning. I got asked to be the, what was I? I was the council member for a Royal Society report on machine learning. And I thought, oh, well, great, what a nice thing to be asked. The only trouble is I don't know anything about machine learning. So I did, and I did a Stanford online course on machine learning. It was brilliant. To be honest, it was better taught than anything I was ever taught as an undergraduate. And of course, because it was fundamentally sort of a little bit of coding, you could actually submit work and get it marked. So it was properly interactive. You had to actually code up, tiny little bits of stuff, but there's so much stuff out there. I mean, I realise that's never really going to cope with the practical skills, practical science that we would like everybody to be doing. So I guess what I'm saying is, as well as the sort of subject by subject deep dives, I think it'd be really useful if as a community you were able to come up with something more holistic that said, if we add these all together, what are we calling for as a shared voice, which of course is such a strength of yours.
In conversations that I've had over the years with civil servants, there's sometimes been a slight apprehension about being pigeonholed as an expert in a particular area, because promotions tend to be diagonal, so you've got to have the flexibility to move between departments. How do we kind of challenge that culture in a way that fosters that deep expertise that the departments need?
I think, so I would call that the culture of the generalist. And it has great strengths, I mean, really enormous strengths, but also weaknesses. And I guess when I talk about I'd like a way into the civil service that takes people who really are specialists. I reckon when you've done 10 years working in a bit of science, and I include social and behavioural science in that, I reckon you could claim yourself to be a specialist in it. I would love to get some of those people into the civil service at senior level, perhaps one level below at that stage, because there's a lot to learn about how to be a civil servant, and then to become generalists. So I would like to see a kind of generalist who has, at one point of their career, really been a scientist. And that's a little bit different from somebody who did a PhD and then joined SEVs. So these are people who worked as scientists. So you can hear that I'm not against the generalist. I just think they're drawn from too narrow a pool of education. Right, I'm sort of timed out. I'm looking for some hosty person who's going to come up here. Let's take that. Some hosty person, do come up here, but I'll take one last question.
So does the government plan to actually do anything about apprenticeships, but specifically for researchers? And that would include PhD students and perhaps research staff, which could then facilitate the conversion into industry.
That would be part. That would be part of the BFE work on skills transition. It would be a discussion of that. They haven't decided what they're going to suggest yet. It would be odd if they didn't want to look. Let me answer that by saying we are extremely aware that this is not just about PhD scientists. That you know, a large part of what was required is about technical skills of many kinds. Thank you. I have to apologise. I'm sorry, I'm going to leave now. I do take skills very seriously, but I'm afraid my diary is such that I can't afford to spend a whole day on it. I hope you have a fantastic day. I look forward to hearing the outputs of your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming today. I really thought beginning of the day. I really appreciate it.
Have a good day.